The time is 7:15. Good morning and welcome to Saturday Mirror, our weekly magazine program, broadcast from the Durban studios. Now let's listen to Jayasudas, Himlata and Vasri Sengupta in Kushiya Hi Kushiya Hu from Dudan Hui Jotiya Manibaye. In 1972, they began their broadcast of their Indian programs on a national basis. In other words, they introduced their Sunday morning musical program on the national network of the English service and introduced a new program, a magazine arrangement called Saturday Mirror. Good morning and welcome to Saturday Mirror, our weekly magazine program, broadcast from the Durban studios.
Hello everyone, welcome to Talk 10 with Mahen. This is episode 11, part 1. I am so happy to be interviewing today a remarkable woman, someone who is making significant strides in the world of dance in South Africa. And I'm happy to invite today Shrimathi Vasugi Devar Singh.
Thank you, Mahen, and it's so good to see you after a while.
You know, Vasugi, you come from such a well-respected family in Durban. We all remember the wonderful voice of Appa, the late Mr Jugadheesan Devar. And my husband and I were so fortunate he was the master of ceremonies at our wedding. What a beautiful voice, how well suited it was for the South African airwaves. So we are really so happy to be talking about Mr. Jugadheesan Devar today.
Thank you for that, Mahen. Dad was the voice that everyone knew as they were growing up in South Africa.
Vasugi, what was it like growing up in a home that was steeped in culture?
It was like a busy street. My mother was so busy in the kitchen feeding all of us, and my father was so busy arranging rehearsal schedules and things like that. And all that with other artists walking in. Today, every one of them is a major artist in the country. And I have to tell you of the two most important people. Sunny Pillai, I remember him when I was about 8 years old and practicing his singing in our lounge. And Karthikeyan, who was a little young boy, was in my house playing tabla. And today, Karthikeyan is such a great vidwan. The same with Tanser Nepal. He used to be in and out of our home with his dad and his mom. So that's the environment we grew up in.
Are there any interesting or very significant memories when you think about dad and mom?
Two very great memories will never leave my mind. They were the turning point of my life in shaping me. And the one, when my dad took me to India. And dad went via London, and that was in 1973, which was pretty early days for South African Indians to be traveling. We got to London when dad had some interviews with BBC. Then from there, we shot straight to Chennai, and that's where he left me, found me a teacher, and it was history after that. The most outstanding thing for my mum, she was barely 40 years old then, when I was in Chennai. And my mum was sent across. She left 4 girls with my dad in South Africa, sent across to Chennai to plan my Arangetram. But she took on this major task to come to a foreign country and arrange an outstanding concert where I was being presented to society through the Arangetram. Was such a feat for us as a family. The cherry on the top was Mum and I was invited to Subbalakshmi's house. When we went over to tell, because she was daddy's friend. Whenever he went to Kalki Press and met with her husband and so forth. So my mum, whom I said was also, very new to this whole arrangement. So the both of us went to Subbalakshmi's house and she said, I insist that you have lunch with me. And that's a highlight in my life.
Absolutely. You are so blessed to have had that direct contact with the, MS Amma. I want to talk a little bit about the Clairwood Tamil Institute.
We as a family moved to Clairwood. I was 6 years old. The Clairwood Tamil Institute, together with Mr. V.S. Padiachi and all the others, got together and said, let's start the I Stedford movement in Clairwood. Now, whilst we're on Clairwood, I must explain that Clairwood was the hub. It was a cultural hub. All the linguistic groups lived there in harmony. We had 3 halls or 4 halls representing each linguistic group. Padma Jurani was for Telugu school, Clairwood Tamil Institute, Tamil school. Hindi school was housed in Cherry Road in a venue run by the Yuvik Arya Samaj.
Can you tell us about some of the interesting personalities that came from Clairwood?
Judge Navanidam Pillai. She lived in Clairwood, born and brought up. Eventually sat at The Hague and the UN as Commissioner of Human Rights. Then we had Mr. Rajbansi. But when he was my dad's student, he won the Rembrandt Award as a high school student in art. And who was his art teacher? My father. Then we had Professor Pubalan Pillai, came from the renowned Carnatic singers in that family, Mr. Muthu Pillai and his entire family. They all sing very well. And we all learned music in that home. Then we had Dr. Bugsy, but he's Dr. Bhagwan Singh, who has served as an outstanding surgeon at the King Edward Hospital and has trained a number of surgeons through the years, and he's Clairwood.
So, can you briefly tell us some of the cultural events that Dad promoted?
I must say that Dad didn't do some. He practically ran a whole ambit of cultural events. He was promoting language in wherever it was required in terms of setting. He didn't physically teach it, but he set up institutes that would promote it. He also encouraged every youngster whom he thought had the talent to practice their art form and their craft. He was a planner in his life, my father. He would plan backstage, he would plan in the background. The only time he came forward was if he had to take the mic, which of course he was forced to do because more often than not, everybody wanted to hear that velvety voice. But he was a great thinker, he was the planner, and as his daughter, I must say, it sounds a bit boastful, the cultural standards in our country to date has come from that kind of dedication. And he worked with a band of men around him. And I must name a few people. And one outstanding person everybody knows is Mr. T.P. Naidu. Then we had Mr. Nitya Naidu. We had Uncle Jackson, whom I fondly call all of them Uncle. And Mr. Madan Nepal, Mr. Tony Ayavu. Yeah, Mahen, just to give you a rundown as to such a dedicated band of men who are responsible for having brought culture to where it is in this country today.
When I think back, it was an absolute golden period where we all just flourished with all these, highly energized people around us that also inspired the artist. Appa had an illustrious career with the SABC. Can you share some of the memories about that?
Yeah, Dad, after teaching for 30 years, in 1971, he gave up teaching and he joined the SABC. He was asked to do and compile, actually, a magazine program called Saturday Mirror. And that magazine program, it was articles and poetry and music, and dancers came on and spoke, and musicians performed, and dramatists came on. So he got the entire community involved. It was a 2-hour program. And then, of course, on Sunday morning, they ran a music program, purely music, where they played discs, all the overseas artists, mainly from India. And of course, local artists were put on as well. And it was just a very rich, but the interesting thing was, there was such a balance of all our linguistic groups. There was Tamil, there was Telugu, Hindi, Gujarati, and Urdu. And all 5 linguistic groups appeared in both those programs. And then Daddy started NICO, Natal Indian Cultural Organization. And that too was brought together by the harmony of linguistic groups. It traveled around the Republic of South Africa with concerts, reflecting all musical groups that performed in terms of the linguistic differences.
If you had to conclude with a tribute to your parents, what would that be?
My tribute to my parents, and I will say this on behalf of my sisters as well, is I think we were the luckiest girls to be born to parents who may not have had a lot of money, but gave us the experience of our rich heritage and made us and shaped us into whom we are today.
South Africa has so many beautiful souls that have touched our lives in many ways. One such cultural titan was the late Mr. Jugadheesan Devar. We thank Shrimathi Vasugi Devar Singh for sharing such precious memories about her father's contribution to culture, music, art, and the broadcasting in South Africa.